It is just past noon in Kuwait City, and the temperature reading on a downtown billboard has already crossed 45 degrees Celsius. Nobody outside is moving faster than they have to. The streets are quiet, the malls are full. Behind glass towers that would look at home in Dubai or Doha, air conditioning units the size of shipping containers are working harder than almost anything else in the country, burning through electricity generated by the same resource that built every building around them: oil. This is Kuwait, and most of what people think they know about it fits on a bumper sticker: rich, small, desert, oil. All of that is true. None of it is the whole story. Start with the map. Kuwait sits at the very top of the Persian Gulf, wedged between Iraq to the north and Saudi Arabia to the south, with a coastline curling around a natural deep-water harbor called Kuwait Bay. The country is small, smaller than the state of New Jersey, an almost entirely flat desert. There are no rivers, there are no permanent lakes. For most of its history, the defining question for anyone living here wasn't oil. It was water. The population today sits at roughly 5 million people. And here is the number that surprises most outsiders. Only about 3 in 10 residents are actually Kuwaiti citizens. The rest, the majority, are expatriates, migrant workers, and foreign residents from across South Asia, the Arab world and beyond, running everything from construction sites to hospitals to the service counters of the malls. The question was never really whether Kuwait is wealthy. The question is who that wealth belongs to, who built it, and who is standing next to it while it's counted. Now, the part almost no visitor expects. Long before anyone had heard of Kuwaiti crude, this stretch of coastline was known for something else entirely: pearls. In the 18th century, Bedouin clans from Central Arabia, most notably the Bani Utub, settled along Kuwait Bay and founded a trading post. What grew from that settlement was a merchant economy built on the sea. Kuwaiti dhows sailed the Gulf and the Indian Ocean trading goods, and generations of Kuwaiti men worked as pearl divers, plunging without oxygen tanks into Gulf waters for oysters that might or might not contain anything valuable at all. It was brutal, dangerous work, done season after season, and it built the foundations of Kuwaiti trading families whose names still carry weight in the country's business world today. Then in the 1920s and 30s, Japanese cultured pearls flooded the global market and gutted the natural pearl trade almost overnight. Entire families whose income had depended on the sea for generations watched that income disappear within a few short years. Kuwait's economy for a moment had nothing solid to stand on. That moment did not last long. But look closer at what that pearling economy actually left behind, because it matters more than a footnote. The merchant families who financed pearling voyages, who owned the dhows and organized the crews, built something that outlasted the pearls themselves: a culture of trade, risk, and long-distance deal-making that later transferred almost seamlessly into the oil business. When foreign oil companies arrived looking for local partners and local knowledge of the coastline, they weren't dealing with a society encountering commerce for the first time. They were dealing with people who had spent 2 centuries negotiating with buyers from India, Persia, and East Africa. The skill set didn't disappear when the pearls did. It just found a new resource to attach itself to. Here is a fact that says more about the modern Gulf than almost anything else. Kuwait's oil concession was granted in 1934, split evenly between British and American companies. Oil was struck in 1938, and then nothing happened. World War II put the entire project on hold, and serious development didn't begin until 1946. But once it started, it did not slow down. Kuwait sits on some of the largest proven oil reserves on the planet, and by the 1980s, the country had one of the highest per capita incomes anywhere in the world. Petroleum and petroleum-derived products still account for the overwhelming majority of Kuwait's export revenue today, and the country was one of the 5 founding members of OPEC, a seat at the table it has held since the organization's creation. Within a single generation, a nation that had been trading pearls by hand went from that world to negotiating oil concessions with international companies, and within another generation after that, to one of the wealthiest per capita economies anywhere on Earth. Hold on to that timeline, we will get there. But here is where the story stops being a straight line upward. In August 1990, Iraqi forces under Saddam Hussein invaded and occupied Kuwait, triggering the Gulf War. For 7 months, the country most people associate with unlimited oil wealth was instead occupied territory. Retreating Iraqi forces set fire to hundreds of Kuwaiti oil wells before withdrawing in 1991, creating one of the largest man-made environmental disasters in modern history. A wall of black smoke visible from space, burning for months, turning midday skies over the Gulf almost as dark as night. Kuwait rebuilt. The wells were capped one by one, the oil infrastructure restored, and the country's economy recovered. But the invasion left a permanent mark on how Kuwaitis talk about their own history. Resilience here isn't an abstract marketing word. It's a lived, recent memory, still within living memory of most adults in the country today, and it shows up in how deliberately Kuwait has diversified its financial strategy since. The scale of the firefighting effort alone became a story of its own. Extinguishing hundreds of burning wells took international teams of specialists working through most of 1991, using techniques that had never been deployed at that scale before. Engineers had to figure out, essentially in real time, how to cap wells that had been deliberately sabotaged to burn for as long as possible. What should have taken years of oil production offline instead came back faster than almost anyone predicted, and that recovery speed became its own point of national pride. Proof to Kuwaitis that the country could absorb a catastrophic blow and still get back on its feet on its own terms. Here is a fact that quietly explains a lot about how Kuwait thinks long-term. In 1953, before Kuwait even became fully independent, the country established what is recognized as the world's oldest sovereign wealth fund, a mechanism to take oil revenue and invest it abroad, rather than spend it all as it came in. That fund, the Kuwait Investment Authority, now holds stakes in companies and assets scattered across the globe, acting as a financial cushion explicitly designed to outlast the oil itself. This is a country that watched its main export get set on fire once. It has been quietly hedging against a second version of that story ever since. So what does daily life actually look like? Start with the climate, because it shapes everything else. Kuwait's summers are ferocious, long stretches above 40 degrees Celsius, sometimes climbing well past 50 in the hottest months, with rainfall so sparse the entire country receives less in a year than some cities get in a single storm. Outdoor life reorganizes itself around the heat. Mornings and evenings belong to people. The middle of the day belongs to air conditioning. That has shaped Kuwait City into something distinct, a metropolis built inward. Enormous shopping malls function as genuine public gathering spaces, not just retail centers, places where families spend entire afternoons, not because they're indulgent, but because the alternative is standing outside in conditions the human body isn't built for. The Kuwait Towers rise over the Gulf coastline as the city's most recognizable landmark, their water storage spheres doubling as an observation deck and revolving restaurant. The old Souk al-Mubarakia, by contrast, is where the city's older rhythm survives. Spice stalls, gold merchants, and coffee shops that predate the skyline around them by decades. Family structure remains central to Kuwaiti social life, with extended families often living in close proximity and gathering regularly for meals that stretch across an entire evening. A cultural through line that oil wealth changed the scale of, but did not erase. Food tells its own version of this story. Kuwaiti cuisine leans on rice, lamb, fish pulled from the Gulf, and dishes like makhbouz, spiced rice layered with meat, that trace their roots straight back to the trading routes the purling dhows once sailed. Spices that arrived from India and East Africa centuries ago are still the backbone of the national dish today, a direct, edible record of exactly who Kuwait was trading with long before oil ever entered the picture. Coffee culture runs just as deep, with small cups of cardamom-spiced Arabic coffee, treated less as a beverage and more as a ritual of hospitality, offered to guests almost the instant they sit down. Traffic, meanwhile, is its own kind of local folklore. Kuwait City's roads carry a car-dependent population through wide multi-lane highways that were built for a much smaller population decades ago, and rush hour here can stretch a 15-minute drive into an hour without much warning. Ask any resident and they'll have an opinion about it within seconds. Kuwait doesn't fit the stereotype most people import from other Gulf states. There are no man-made islands shaped like palm trees here, no tallest building in the world competition. What Kuwait actually built its reputation on is quieter and honestly more interesting. One of the highest literacy rates in the Arab world, sitting above 96% for both men and women, a heavily subsidized education and healthcare system for citizens, and a currency, the Kuwaiti dinar, that is, unit for unit, the most valuable currency on earth. That last fact catches people off guard every time. It isn't a symbolic thing. It's a direct reflection of how tightly the dinar has historically been managed against oil-backed reserves. A single Kuwaiti dinar converts to several US dollars, which means prices that look small on a local receipt are not small at all once converted home. But here is the pivot, because the full picture matters more than the headline number. Kuwaiti citizens receive substantial state support, subsidized housing, guaranteed public sector employment pathways, free education through university. The economy that generates that support, however, runs largely on the labor of the roughly 7 in 10 residents who are not citizens. Workers from countries like India, Egypt, the Philippines, Bangladesh, and beyond. Many of them employed under a sponsorship-based labor system that ties a worker's legal residency to their employer. That system has drawn sustained scrutiny from international labor and human rights organizations over the years for the vulnerabilities it can create, and reforming it remains an ongoing, unresolved conversation inside Kuwait itself. The wealth is real, so is the imbalance in who carries the weight of producing it. Let's talk numbers, because Kuwait's economic story only makes sense with real figures attached. Kuwait's GDP sits above $150 billion, with GDP per capita landing somewhere in the low to mid 30,000s in nominal terms, and considerably higher when adjusted for purchasing power. Unemployment, at least on paper, is remarkably low, often cited around 2%, though that figure reflects a labor market split sharply between a citizen population with strong public sector guarantees and an expatriate workforce with far less structural security. Petroleum and petrochemicals remain the backbone of everything. Industry accounts for roughly 2/3 of the economy, dwarfing agriculture in a country where, remember, there is almost no arable land to farm in the first place. Nearly all of Kuwait's food is imported, which means every grocery run is, in a very literal sense, an international supply chain problem quietly solved before anyone notices it. Even the water flowing out of a Kuwaiti tap has usually gone through a desalination plant first, since natural fresh water is essentially non-existent here, which means clean drinking water, like almost everything else in daily life, is ultimately downstream of the same energy infrastructure that built the skyline. If you have made it this far and you are enjoying the journey, a like and a subscribe genuinely help. Kuwait knows the oil era does not last forever. The government has published long-range development plans aimed at diversifying the economy, building out finance, logistics, renewable energy, and even space and tourism sectors that barely existed a generation ago. Progress on that diversification has been slower and more contested than in some neighboring Gulf states, partly because Kuwait's parliamentary system, genuinely more open to public dissent and legislative gridlock than most of its neighbors, makes sweeping top-down reform harder to push through quickly. That's a trade-off, not simply a weakness. Kuwait has one of the more politically active national assemblies in the Gulf, and the friction it creates is also a form of accountability that some of its neighbors simply don't have built into their systems at all. No honest account of any oil-wealthy state can skip the harder edges, and Kuwait has its own. The kafala-style sponsorship system already mentioned remains the single most discussed structural issue in conversations about labor rights here, and reform efforts have moved in fits and starts rather than in one clean sweep. Regional instability is also a constant backdrop rather than a distant memory. Kuwait sits close enough to conflicts involving Iraq and Iran that infrastructure incidents and security concerns periodically make international headlines even now. None of this erases the country's stability relative to some of its neighbors, but it does mean wealthy and worry-free are not the same word here, and Kuwaitis themselves are often the first to say so out loud. You would not expect a flat desert nation with almost no rainfall to have much in the way of natural wonder, and Kuwait doesn't try to compete on that front. What it has instead is coastline and history layered into the ground. Failaka Island, just off the coast, holds archaeological remains stretching back to the Bronze Age, and later a Hellenistic-era settlement believed to be connected to the campaigns of Alexander the Great. A genuinely startling layer of ancient history sitting quietly offshore from one of the most modern skylines in the Gulf. Kuwait Bay itself remains a stopover for migratory birds crossing between Africa, Asia, and Europe, making the country an unlikely but well-regarded spot for birdwatchers tracking the Gulf flyway every spring and autumn. The desert interior, unglamorous as it sounds, still holds meaning for Kuwaitis. Weekend camping trips into the open sand during the cooler months are a deeply normal part of the culture, a direct echo of the Bedouin life that predates the entire oil story by centuries, and a reminder that the identity of this place was never only about what sits underneath it. For anyone actually planning to visit, Kuwait City is the obvious starting point, and the Kuwait Towers combined with the waterfront corniche make for an easy first afternoon, with the Gulf on one side and a steady stream of joggers and evening walkers on the other once the heat starts to lift. The Souk al-Mubarakia is worth a slow walk rather than a rushed one. It rewards people who linger over the stalls instead of hurrying past them, and it's one of the few places in the city where the pre-oil rhythm of Kuwait is still visible rather than reconstructed for visitors. The Grand Mosque, one of the largest in the region, offers guided tours for non-Muslim visitors at set hours, and its scale alone is worth the detour. Failaka Island is reachable by ferry for anyone interested in the older, quieter layer of the country's history, and a day trip out there feels less like sightseeing and more like stepping backward through several thousand years in a single afternoon. And travel timing matters more here than almost anywhere else in the region. Winter, roughly November through March, is when the country is actually pleasant to walk around in. Summer travel is possible, but it is an indoor itinerary by necessity, not by choice. And anyone visiting between June and September should plan their days around air-conditioned interiors rather than outdoor sightseeing. Kuwait built one of the fastest transformations from pearl diving trade posts to global oil power anywhere in the 20th century, lost 7 months of its own sovereignty to an invasion that set its own wealth on fire, and rebuilt with a financial discipline, that decades-old sovereign wealth fund, that most nations only start thinking about after a crisis, not before one. It's a country that is genuinely wealthy and genuinely unequal at the same time, genuinely stable and genuinely surrounded by instability, genuinely modern and still, on weekends, driving out into the same desert its founders crossed on camelback 2.5 centuries ago. Maybe the real question isn't whether Kuwait is what you pictured. It's whether any country ever really is, once you actually look past the headline. If you learned something here, that's what this channel is for. Like the video, drop a comment with what surprised you most, and subscribe if you want more of these deep dives. There's a lot more of the world left to get wrong about.